All right, folks, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And folks may still be trickling in, but it's 7:03. Welcome, everyone. My name is John Meisel. I'm the manager of Transportation Operations and Planning at TMACC, which is the Transportation Management Association of Chester County. We're very pleased that you could join us tonight for this open house meeting for the Devault Trail Action Plan, which is the project we've been working on. Next. John, go ahead and flip it. Thanks. This is our agenda for this evening. The way it's going to work is we have about an hour and we're going to present for half that time and leave the other half for Q&A. We're going to go over the project purpose, approach, and products, and then talk about the real substance of the plan, which is what we're suggesting for ownership, management, and maintenance structure for the future trail, and then the next steps, and then we'll open it up to questions. So Linda Csete from Charlestown Township, who's the township manager. Linda, are you out there?
I'm right here.
Oh, good.
Yes, we'd like to welcome everyone to this special presentation of the Devault Trail Action Plan. As John said, I'm Linda Csete, the manager for Charlestown Township. Back in 2020, Charlestown was awarded a TCDI grant from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission to undertake this study that proposes to determine how to best achieve the conversion of the rail line that's currently owned by Norfolk Southern to convert it to a trail beginning in Phoenixville Borough, heading south through Schuylkill, Charlestown, and East Whiteland townships. The options for ownership, management, and maintenance of the future trail will be discussed this evening. John Meisel, who has already introduced himself, of TMACC, has performed a lion's share of the planning work on this project, and I'll turn this program over to him to begin with an introduction of the other project team members.
Next. So just up for this evening, first of all, this meeting is being recorded. And the way the Q&A is going to work is that you can submit your questions through the Q&A feature here in Zoom. And then my colleagues, Tim Phelps and John Ewald, will actually be working to pull those together. And when we get to the Q&A section, your questions will be addressed. Next. Just this is a context map showing the light green is the proposed Devault Trail running from Phoenixville in the north to Great Valley in the south. And it shows the regional context, most importantly, the fact that the Devault Trail in the future will connect to the Schuylkill River Trail in the north and will connect to the proposed Warner Spur Trail. And then in the south, you see the proximity to the Chester Valley Trail. So this trail will be, when it's built, a part of the overall trail network for the region and for Philadelphia for the circuit trails. Next. Just some context slides. The one on the left is the famous trestle that crosses over 29, and that was taken last year. And then these other three are interesting. Those were taken yesterday, and they show the condition, the general condition of the roadbed, which, as you can see, the rails are intact, and there's a lot of debris, a lot of snags and dead branches that will need to be cleared. But overall, the roadbed's in good condition. Next. So the heart of this, our project, our purpose is to build upon the feasibility study that was done in 2015 that really looked at at whether or not it was feasible to build a trail on the old rail bed. That study found it was possible and looked at an alignment from Phoenixville to Great Valley. So from there, we call this the action plan. We got a grant to do this. It's sort of the next step in the process. And it's really to look at who would be the right entity or entities to acquire, own, and manage the future trail corridor. Next. And this slide, which is, I think, helpful to put this plan in the overall context of building a trail. As you can see, the feasibility study was the first step, and this action plan is really just the second step. And afterwards, there are other steps to follow. You know, I have to deal with corridor purchase and developing a plan for the trail, and then the actual design and engineering and building of the trail. And the reason we put this slide in is we wanted to show you where it was in the process, but also to reassure you that there will be ample opportunities for input at every step along the way. So this is just, you know, the next step in the necessary steps for building a trail. Next. So our general approach was to examine comparable trail projects in our region and elsewhere. And luckily we have a number of projects in our region that we can look at how they handled acquisition and management. And in each trail is different, but they serve as good examples. We obviously talked to all the interested stakeholder groups and parties that we could. We've been working with a steering committee throughout this project over the past year and a half. And that steering committee is made up of representatives of all the municipalities along the trail, within the trail corridor, and also stakeholder groups themselves, bike and pedestrian groups, and the county, and Chester County, Montgomery County. So all the real interested parties have been engaged throughout as part of the steering committee. And then we've been looking at all possible different combinations for acquisition, ownership, and maintenance. And we're here tonight to talk about what we think is the most feasible option. And throughout the process, through social media and through these public meetings, we've done our best to engage the public. Next. Next slide. So the products for this study, the final products are really it's going to be a record of all our background research, so that in future steps along the way, whoever conducts those future steps will have a record of exactly what we did and the decisions that we made. And that will be bound in a report along with our recommendations, and also documentations from this public meeting and the first public meeting that was held last June. And that would include questions that came up from the public and answers to those questions. Again, trying to work towards a comprehensive record for the future of this entire process. Next. So these are some of the stakeholder groups, or I should say most of the stakeholder groups that we definitely made sure we involved in the process. As I said, we've been working all along with our project steering committee. We've been meeting separately with the 4 municipalities within the trail corridor. That's Charlestown Township, Schuylkill Township, East Whiteland Township, and Phoenixville Borough. We also engaged the Natural Lands Trust, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them in detail later. And it was also important for us to talk to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and obviously Chester County Planning and Parks and Rec departments, because of their overall involvement with not just Chester County Trail, but all the regional trails and their importance to our work. And they've been part of the project steering committee as well, and they're part of our project team. They're actually a sub-consultant on our project team. And then the other important aspect of stakeholder and community engagement has been public meetings and outreach. And that outreach has really included a separate page on the TMACC website and social media outlets such as Facebook and Instagram, and postings on those, Twitter, and then the townships also use their own websites and mailings for public involvement. Next. So some of the comparable projects that that I hinted at before that we looked at in the area, and these served as examples. The first one is obviously the Schuylkill River Trail, which is a complicated trail that crosses through many municipalities, but is going to be a connection for the Devault Trail. We spoke with the folks who manage sections of that and how they do it. Then obviously the Chester Valley Trail, which is right in our backyard here. And we've spoken with folks at Chester County about the way they went about acquiring and managing the trail. And then another example is the Saucon Rail Trail, which is in Northampton and Lehigh counties. So not too far northwest of here. And the reason that one is important is that one also has 4 municipalities that are involved. It's about the same length, the corridor, which is about 7 miles. And so it's a really good example for us to look at. Obviously, the Chester Valley Trail and the Schuylkill River Trail are a bit longer. But because of their proximity, they make sense for us to use those for closer examination. And then the last trail example that we looked at is one called the Doodle Trail, which is in South Carolina, in Pickens County, South Carolina. And the reason we chose that one is that was also a Norfolk Southern rail line before it became a public trail. And so I spoke with the folks down there who acquired and who manage that trail to see what information we could glean from them. So, I think we're doing our homework, trying to look at some good examples that we can use to sort of build our plan for the Devault Trail. Next. So what you see here is the best way that we can present all of the various things for this plan, for the trail, that we're evaluating in terms of potential acquisition, ownership, and management structures. So along the top are the various entities or types of entities that we could think would be possibilities for the Devault Trail. And along the top, I'm not sure if you can read this clearly. We've got PennDOT, we have the Natural Lands Trust, we have Chester County, we have sort of a generic title of municipal authority, another title of intermunicipal agreement, and then finally a nonprofit association. And those final 3 that I mentioned, municipal authority and intermunicipal agreement and a nonprofit, are the ones that we really honed in on and are the 3 most used types of management entities. A municipal authority is one that involves a layer of government that can be, it takes a special act to install a municipal authority. It has the ability to tax residents in the municipalities. It also allows if the local elected officials want sort of to steer clear of a project, You might use a municipal authority. An example of an authority that many of you might be familiar with would be a sewer authority. But there are many different types that can be established. An intermunicipal agreement is just a simple legal agreement that defines how the duties of the trail, that would be management mostly, would be divided up among the different municipalities. And finally, a nonprofit association is just that. It's a separate entity that's drawn up as a nonprofit to manage the trail. So those are the different entities that we're looking at. Let me just say a word about the Natural Lands Trust. It came to our attention as we went through this process that the folks at Natural Lands, which many of you may be familiar with because they own and manage so many open spaces in our region, it came to our attention that they would not only be interested, but might be the most natural group to act and help out in the process here, because they have a lot of experience with land acquisition. And we reached out to them and talked to the folks at Natural Lands, and they did indeed express an interest and an ability to get involved in the acquisition process, and which is great news. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into the meat of our recommendations, but it's a great group that I think can avail ourselves of their offer of help. Now, along the left side, we have all the different steps along the way, and that starts with which group would negotiate with Norfolk Southern Railroad, which is really the first step. When we started this project, we reached out to Norfolk Southern, made contact. They made it very clear to us that they wanted to negotiate with one body, and that once the body had been determined, that they would be willing to negotiate for a sale of the roadway bed. And we don't know what that price would be yet, but we do know that they want to deal with one group, which is what we're trying to deal with here. And the next steps would be the acquisition, the purchase, and underneath purchase, you see some different forms of acquiring land through grants, bonds, donation, or lease. And then the next step is the ownership of the land. And then, as I touched on earlier, it would then be trail design, construction, maintenance, and then underneath maintenance, you see the different types of maintenance, regular maintenance that would have to take place, and then the regular management, which includes trash pickup, trail cleanup, snow removal, which isn't done on most trails, but it's actually done on the Chester Valley Trail. And then finally, policing or public safety, which is very important to figure out. And so this matrix, this table encapsulates our thought process. And we went through and talked and first labeled whether each group would be capable, and that's either no or yes, as you can see. And finally, which groups would be the most appropriate groups along the way, and that's highlighted in green. So I touched upon Natural Lands and their involvement a minute ago, and we feel they'd be the right ones, and they're willing to actually help out with negotiation with the railroad to acquire the property. They're highlighted in green. They also have a lot of experience obtaining grants for this type of acquisition. We don't know yet exactly where the money for the purchase would come from, but it's very likely that much of it would come, if not all, from federal or state or even some county grants. And then we're also highlighting that some of the land, I'm not sure this is going to happen, could either be leased or donated. PennDOT and Chester County are also good sources for grants, and we've spoken to those folks and they can help out with grant sources. But really what you see is what we're hinting at, which is after our evaluation, we really feel that a simple intermunicipal agreement between the 4 townships involved would be the best way to actually hold ownership and manage the various aspects of the trail. Now, that means those municipalities agree in principle to divide up the future management. I'm not talking here about what the price tag would be at this point for each, how it would be divided up. That's not in the scope of this project, but that that really a simple intermunicipal agreement and not a nonprofit and not a municipal authority is probably the best way to go. We have run these preliminary recommendations by our steering committee, and they agreed with us wholeheartedly that these are the appropriate groups to recommend. And so we feel pretty confident about it. Obviously, at this point, there's a lot to be ironed out. And I know that you all have a lot of questions about cost and how it would be divided up, and those things can be hashed out. But I think what we're talking about here is a necessary recommendation for how to move forward in the future. Next. So again, I just touched upon really what is an intermunicipal agreement. And it's really the simplest way for 4 municipalities that border each other to provide public services or a recreational resource. Don't feel that a special ability to levy a tax is needed like with an authority, so we don't need the authority. And really the agreement is a simple document that stipulates how future management and maintenance and public safety, policing, and those tasks are going to be divided up and done. And then representatives from each municipality would meet at least annually, usually in the budget season and early fall, to plan out the list of projects for the following year, the maintenance schedule. I do at this point want to say a word about policing and public safety. The way that most of the examples we've looked at, and the way I think we're probably thinking for Devault Trail, is that each municipality would pitch in with their police force. Charlestown, I know, has state police and doesn't have a municipal police force, but there could be a reciprocal agreement with the other 3 municipalities to cover policing. But it's also a matter of, well, there's sort of 2 aspects to policing. There's emergency response, and then there's regular patrolling. And the patrol of the trail, part of it is done naturally when maintenance is done, but the other part could also be done by friends groups or by even contracting out with one municipality's police force to do a regular patrol. So there are many different ways of dealing with the policing of the trail. Next. And then, as I've talked about, how would maintenance work, which is really the heart of it. And there's really 4 options for maintenance, which is to hire out a third-party contractor and pay them, or to really contract with one of the municipalities along the trail, and they would essentially get paid by the contributions from the other municipalities and themselves to conduct maintenance. And the third possibility is just to divide it up among the municipalities. And fourth is really important, which is that in a lot of the trails that we looked at and a lot of the regional trails, there are friends groups that really do a lot of work on regular trail maintenance. It's amazing. They really do contribute in a significant way. And so there could be a Friends of the Devault Trail type of trail group, which could be formed to help out with maintenance. Next. And then as I touched on, how would public safety work and policing? And these are the options I talked about a minute ago, which is where all municipalities take responsibility, or emergency response and policing is shared through mutual aid, meaning municipalities do all participate, but they overlap and share their responses to police needs. And then the Friends of the Devault Trail type group could also help patrol the corridor. You know, with all the trail research that's out there, it becomes clear that one of the keys to a safe trail is just having regular eyes on the trail, regular maintenance, and regular patrol. It doesn't always have to be a police patrol, but just a regular set of eyes or maintenance or just people along the corridor. And that's a key to having a safe trail. Next. So next steps, as I alluded to earlier, this is just the second of many steps. But the immediate steps that would follow after this action plan, and I should say that we're really towards the end. Our grant is completing this June. So our plan, our final report will be wrapped up. It will be delivered to Charlestown Township and the other municipalities along the trail by the end of June. And then what the logical next steps immediately after that would be to establish the formal working group that we've been talking about to put the intermunicipal agreement together. So it'd be formalizing the arrangement between the municipalities and putting the agreement together. And then things like doing a comprehensive title search for the properties that make up the Norfolk Southern rail line, just so we know what we're dealing with and know how the purchase and the price would work. And then identifying funds for land purchase and finding out a price, the logical next steps. And then finally, after that, begin to look at the engineering of the trail, the actual design and those engineering costs. And some of those costs, some of the engineering can be done through the use of a county vision partnership program grant. So there are monies out there to help with these different steps along the way. Next. So here we are. It's 7:31 and we'd like to open it up so we make sure we have plenty of time to address all of your questions. Tim and John,
So,
do you want
yeah, so John, we do have a couple of questions that were in the chat. See if I can get these correct here. Norfolk Southern was engaged early on in the beginning. They made it very clear that they would want to focus with one entity to acquire the group. We have not had a continued conversation with Norfolk Southern based upon Norfolk Southern's choice. But we try to keep them abreast of the conversations as we move through them. The Circuit Trail and other coalition groups were a part of the steering committee. And so they have been working with us and making some recommendations through that process. So we also have a couple of friends groups that have been dealing with making some recommendations as we move through this. There was a question about eminent domain. At this time, that is something that we did not investigate because of understanding what Norfolk Southern's direct desires about being purchased on that front. So if a body was formed, whether it be the county or somebody else, and they chose to take that route, that could be an option, but is not not an option that we explored because of the knowledge that we had with Norfolk Southern.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's my understanding that individual municipalities actually have the ability to conduct eminent domain if they need to. But again, as Tim said, we just haven't explored that.
And then another recent question that just popped up was a question about the start. Where would the start of the construction of the trail be? And when might that work start? We do not know the answer to that. That was not a part of the scope of work that we did. So sorry that I can't answer that directly. I would imagine that both of those questions would hinge on when the trail was purchased, and then doing the design work for the trail, and then doing all the contracting bidding for that. So that could be in the future, far in the future, in that nature. Well,
and part of the trail design process is also looking at the trailheads and trail access. So when the 2015 feasibility study done, it was really looking at whether it was possible to build a trail on the rail bed, and if so, what that might look like. But then in one of the next steps, which is trail design, that's really when access to the trail, where the actual trailheads would be in each municipality, that's when that would be looked at. I mean, that's an important, everyone wants to know where they would get on and off the trail, where in their local neighborhood or municipality they'd be able to do that, and that would be looked at in a necessary future step.
Another question that I had received here, is the equestrian portion of this trail still under consideration? Our assumptions are all based upon what the original proposal was on the feasibility study. So we've had no discussion on trail use. It has been all focused on the trail ownership side. Does this management plan activity determine the acquisition plan? Can you review the steps again? So part of that management plan through the acquisition side would be that intermunicipal agreement coming together and making the decisions on how that they would like to acquire that property. It probably would be in direct negotiations with Norfolk Southern based upon a fee structure. Another follow-up question was how long or how many years might the project take? It could be done tomorrow if there was a pot of money that was brought to the table that paid for all the design and construction and acquisition. It would be that time frame that the municipality's agreement would have to come together to make those decisions. So there are a lot of items that are hinged on project timeline and project costs.
The time frame we've talked about with our steering committee and heard from folks that have been through this actual process is, if everything goes right, perhaps not 5, but not as many as 10 years.
Question, since the Chester Valley Trail and the Schuylkill River Trail were developed as county-owned trails, and this trail would connect to both, what factors led to the committee and the study to conclude an intermunicipal agreement to be preferable? Part of that conversation was based upon stakeholder interviews, and we did have stakeholder interviews with both the county and with the state. At this time, they wished not to be included in that part of the process.
I think the other part of this is it really came down to whether we were going to recommend the intermunicipal agreement or whether we were going to recommend an authority, and we were exhaustive in our research of authorities. Tim and myself spoke to 3 different attorneys that are experts on the formation of authorities. We wanted to make sure we vetted this clearly because there are some advantages to authorities. The one I haven't mentioned is that they're able to borrow more money. But again, it really came down to, did we need to add this extra layer of government that separates the municipalities, elected officials from the trail? Do they need the ability to implement special taxing? All the attorneys we spoke to said, I wouldn't go that route. I would keep it at the basic intermunicipal agreement. So that's really why we recommended that. But we really were exhaustive in our research and tried to speak to as many folks as we could who are experts in this. And we feel pretty confident that the intermunicipal agreement's the way to go.
One of the other questions that has appeared now is, given the progress on e-bikes, where is this plan vision as a transportation resource, and how might this affect grants and design parameters? So we as in TMACC were really interested in participating in this grant process, because we do look at the corridor as a transportation corridor. And because of both aesthetics and frankly, geography, when we look at congestion mitigation issues, the Route 29 corridor through this segment really does not allow itself to be, use the word widened through here. So this becomes a congestion mitigation project, but it also becomes a quality of life project by providing alternative modes, access for folks to be able to come down or up or down the Route 29 corridor using a safe mode. There is pretty much a standard for any trail development. And so we've had conversations with professionals on that. Probably something that would be similar to the Chester Valley Trail, as well as what would be coordinated for the equestrian side in that nature. But again, that would all come through the design period, which is outside the scope of what our research was here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when we looked at the different trails in the area and other areas on the East Coast. Most of them are paved, but some of them are crushed stone. Some of them are a mixture. And so, as Tim said, that would be determined, the surface would be determined in the design phase. But I also wanted to point out that in 2015, the feasibility study that was done considered the possibility of walkers, bikers, runners, and all other modes of transport, including, roller skating, rollerblades, that they would all be sharing the trail, and also looked at the possibility of equestrian use. Now that would probably be done on a separate parallel trail. And so that would require the examination of the trail right-of-way width to see if there's room to accommodate a separate equestrian trail. But there are quite a few users in this region of equestrian trails, and it's definitely something to be considered.
Why wasn't Chester County interested in participating, and would it be easier for participating municipalities to contribute funds to the county for the project and let them run with it? So we went through an interview process, and we know that in current conditions, the county has several very large trail projects that are under their purview right now. At this time, that they weren't able to commit to working on this particular project. Our hope would be that in the future that the county would be able to participate at some level on this. But at this time, in making our recommendations, the county chose to not participate at this level in engagement.
And that they do have a considerable amount of expertise that they're willing to contribute.
So is the extension of Sidley Chester Valley access and the GVSD high school still in play? Is this a Norfolk Southern? I believe that there is not an alignment of the two rail lines. The one rail line actually ends at a warehousing facility, but I may be incorrect on that because I have not memorized the rail maps that are out there. I'm going to call on Brian Steitch, who is here
Okay.
for Fisher County Planning. Brian.
Thanks. Yeah, and to address the previous question, I mean, Tim, you were correct. You know, we just don't have the capacity to address it right now. That doesn't mean we're not participating in this project by any means. I mean, we're participating in this. We, did the Warner Spur study before that, before this one, which is, connecting trail to the south of the Chester Valley Trail. They're just the particulars of this trail and being with a Norfolk Southern owned right of way. We don't have a very good negotiating status with Norfolk Southern at the moment. And, but we were certainly helping out in any way we can with, maintenance activities, not necessarily contributing to maintenance because this isn't a trail corridor that the county is looking to own. But we can certainly assist in many other ways towards the development of the trail and getting it up and running. The other question about extending it to Great Valley School District and high school there, the rail corridor may still physically be there, but I believe it is all privately owned property. The Norfolk Southern ownership of that corridor more or less ends right around 29. So if there were to be any extensions through along that line, I think we would have to, or the committee here would have to seek out in easements from those private landowners if it does make that connection. We'd have to look into it a little bit more. So I hope that addresses some of the questions. I'm sorry, my network adapter failed, so I missed a lot of the things and I was just able to get back. So my apologies for not, I didn't fully understand the context there.
So are there any other questions that people would like to put in the chat? John, what closing, if we have no more questions,
Yep.
we can move to the
The next
closing
slide.
remarks.
Next slide, if you would. So obviously you may have questions that need following up on, questions that come to your head after this meeting. And this is the contact information for myself and for Linda Csete at Charlestown Township. And you can reach out to us via email with anything that comes to mind in the days, weeks, and months that follow this meeting. Feel free to reach out to us and we will get back to you. If we don't have an answer, we'll find it. And all of the, as I said, all of your questions and the answers to those questions, we will include in the final document as part of the documentation for this entire planning process. Next slide. This just is a reminder of where the funding came from for this particular project. It's a TCDI grant provided by the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. Wanted to say thank you all for your interest in this project and for your attendance tonight. As I alluded to at the beginning, there's many more steps and many more chances for you to stay in touch and participate. Probably the easiest way for you to stay in touch, to have your fingers on the pulse, is to go to our website, tmacc.org. And you'll see that there's a separate little project page for the Devault Trail. And as we move through the next steps, we'll update there. And that's probably the easiest place to keep track of what's going on. And again, we're looking at wrapping this project up by June, and which is good because then we can move it along to the next steps. Thank you to everybody for their interest and participation.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.